I'm always very scared, I'm wary of this thing about how intellectuals or writers give voices to people. And I always say, well, uh, it's not that if they are alive, we don't speak for them, we speak with them. If they are not alive, we speak without them.
Good evening. Buenas noches. I'm Susan Spurlock, Executive Director of Ford Hall Forum at Suffolk University, and I'd like to welcome you to this evening's program. As the United States honors the contributions and voices of women during Women's History Month, we are proud to present the second installment of the virtual event series, Beyond Borders, Women's Stories and the Art of Bearing Witness. This evening, we are honored to welcome Dr. Alicia Partnoy, internationally acclaimed playwright, scholar, memoirist, survivor, and human rights to Ford Hall Forum. She will be joined in conversation by this evening's moderator, Dr. Amy Kaminsky. I want to thank you so much for joining us this evening. We are very, very excited to have you here. Thank you.
Song of the Exiled, translated by Richard Schaff and Isai Maria Barnwell from Revenge of the Apple. They cut off my voice, so I grew two voices. In two different tongues, my songs I pour. They took away the sun. Two brand new suns like resplendent drums today I'm playing. Isolated I was from all my people. My twin songs are returning like in an echo. And despite the darkness of this exile, my poem sets fire against the mirror. They cut off my voice. I grew two voices. Canción de la exiliada. Está en Revenge of the Apple. Me cortaron la voz, dos voces tengo. En dos lenguas distintas mi canto vierto. Me arrancaron el sol. Dos soles nuevos como dos relucientes tambores sueno. Me aislaron de mi gente. Y hoy a mi pueblo vuelve mi canto doble como en un eco. Y a pesar del oscuro de este destierro, se enciende hoy mi poesía contra un espejo. Me cortaron la voz, dos voces tengo.
What's amazing about the song and the poem is how it models the theme for tonight. That is, you know, two voices aren't enough. Two languages aren't enough. The language of music, the language of poetry, words and music coming together across borders. And I just, you know, I'm so moved by the collaboration. Sweet Honey in the Rock singing the thoughtfulness of Isai Barnwell, who wrote the music and has given you permission to present it, your generosity in giving your royalties to projects that Sweet Honey in the Rock is supporting in Africa. You know, we could stop here because it says it all.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, when I heard that song for the first time played by them, I was so scared because I had the weirdest feeling. I thought, now I can die. Now I can die because my voice is in the world in such a beautiful way. And it was this auditorium filled with women, and so they really gave me a lot of strength. Yeah,
I think they've given us all strength in the work that they do, as you give us strength, as you've given me strength in thinking about the work that I do as a scholar and what my responsibilities are as a scholar. But we're going to get to that stuff later. The Revenge of the Apple is, I have it here, I have my copy. Is one of your many books. And another way that you have been thinking about and working through solidarity, many voices, is your work as a compiler. Here's another one of your books, You Can't Drown the Fire, Latin American Women Writing in Exile. And I don't know if people know how much work, how much love, how much compassion, how much thoughtfulness it takes to put together a work like this, to make the voices of women from all over Latin America who have wound up in exile over the many, many decades, whose voices we all need to hear. So, could you talk a little bit about what went into this book, which unfortunately I think is out of print now, but somebody needs to bring it back into print?
Yeah, well, it was the year after I published The Little School, and about my experience as a disappeared in Argentina. And I was lecturing. I had a lot of response from people, and then I thought, but they don't know about these other women. There are so many as me. I felt alone. I felt very lonely, like talking about this. And actually, the press, the publishers, Clear's Press, is women's press, said, well, we can do this anthology. And there was no internet. There was no, there was no Facebook. There was no Instagram. There was only snail mail back then in '87, and these women responded. The first person who responded was Claribel Alegría. Wow. Claribel, I sent these messages and letters were coming to my P.O. box. At that time, I didn't want the military to know my address, and I had a P.O. box still. And so Claribel Alegría sent an essay, and she also sent a poem by a girl in a refugee camp in El Salvador, and they, and the first excerpt of Rigoberta Menchú's work that was not in a bookshop form appeared in there, and when she won the Nobel in 1992, that was the excerpt that they translated. There was an interview with a journalist from Argentina that they translated into Spanish. And they made Rigoberta speak Argentine Spanish because the book is in English. So all these stories, but all these women are still connected with them in a way. And I felt I was accompanied.
I don't think I ever told you this story, but I was teaching the little school, and there was a lovely young woman in the class who raised her hand and she said, I don't know if you know my grandmother, but she's a writer too. And I said, oh, really? What's her name? And she said, Claribel Alegría. And I said, your grandmother is Claribel. She said, yes. And I should have known because she was named for her. So, these connections just keep going. And this was in Minnesota, just completely out of the blue that this person should.
Yeah, and you have a whole book about exile and women and writing in exile. And
well, my book is about after exile, right? Yeah. What happens when people think that it's easy to go home? And as you know, it's not. It just isn't. Lives change, situations change, and some people.
I always say that it's easier for my was easier for my body to return to the country than for my work.
Mm.
So still in Argentina, I'm translating now my essays because they don't know my scholarship. And the little school was published like 20 years after it was published in the United States. So Exile, I mean, I returned to the country 10 years before, but then the book didn't go back. So, so I'm gonna read.
Did you want to read from the little school?
Yeah, I'll do this.
An extraordinarily meaningful work, and why don't you read and then we can talk about it.
Okay, I'm gonna read Graciela Around the Table. 15 days ago, this business of walking around the table began. At least it's something different to do every afternoon. I've already walked around the table 8 times today. 2 more steps to the edge. I feel a little dizzy. Now in the opposite direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. What name did you choose, ma'am? What a question, as if they cared. I must admit that now they feel some sort of compassion. They no longer beat or molest me. In fact, I've just realized that for the past few days, they haven't screamed at me either. Well, with this huge belly. But they weren't worried about my belly when they arrested me. The trip from Cutralcó to Neuquén was pure hell. They knew I was pregnant. It hadn't occurred to me that they could torture me while we were traveling. They did it during the whole trip, the electric prod on my abdomen, because they knew about the pregnancy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each shock brought that terrible fear of miscarriage, and that pain, my baby's pain. I think it hurt more because I knew he was being hurt, because they were trying to kill him. Sometimes I think it would have been better if I had lost him. Adrianita. I swear I won't think about her, at least until I reach the 20th round. If I make it to the 20th, perhaps I'll be able to make it to the 25th, the 30th. Afterwards, I'll request to be taken to the bathroom. If they take me, I could even wash my hands. They've been allowing me to use their bathroom for the past month. I couldn't keep my balance at the latrine because of my weakness. When I get back, I'm going to eat that little piece of bread I saved from my lunch. I'm going to make it last as always. The baby walks around this table with me, within me. 4 more rounds to go. I'm already exhausted from walking, no breath left. I know this table by heart. I picked it up from all the tables of the world, even if I could never see it well. 30 rounds, 15 days, 450 rounds. Today, my blindfold is very tight and I can't even see my feet or the dress with the flower pattern. Who was the owner of this dress? The child is moving. My love, to protect you, my dear child. Me? So unprotected myself. If only your father were here, perhaps you could hear his whispers. Be strong, my child. Take heart. The future is yours. Your future, my child. We gave up sunshine on our skin for your future. The 30th round of this living death. Don't forgive them, my child. Don't forgive this table either.
Wow. It's so powerful. You know, the fact that you give Graciela her voice through your voice, that when you start writing, or when I started reading the stories, the parts that are the story essays that are in the little school, you tell your own story in the third person, but you tell Graciela's story in the first person. she is not here anymore to give her voice, but you give it to her. And I think that that interchange is so extraordinary. You speak as she speaks to her unborn child, who is now long born, and speaks to our responsibility to those children.
Yeah, we are looking for this baby. I'm always very scared. I'm wary of this thing about how intellectuals or writers give voices to people, and I always say, well, it's not that if they are alive, we don't speak for them, we speak with them. If they are not alive, we speak without them. But the moment, my most important moment as a writer was when this book was presented in Argentina at the university I used to attend. And in the audience, Adrianita, I think there were pictures of her in the slideshow. I don't know if they showed her in the slides, but Adriana there, she is now grown up, but this is her age back then. And she was in the audience with her two children. She's now working with the grandmothers of Plaza de Mayo. And so I asked people if they had questions. There were hundreds of people, relatives of the disappeared. They're in my hometown. They have traveled to come, and she raises her hand, and she says, "Can you read the story of my mom?" And I say, "Which one?" And she motions, right? Like she motions around the table. So that was the moment I felt validated with my work as a witness and as a writer, because the daughter understood, even when I couldn't be in Graciela's head, that I was trying to convey her voice, and she felt supported by that. And yeah.
That's, you know, in a way, it kind of echoes my experience with you when I think you know that I found the book, The Little School, shortly after it was published in the US, and I bought it, and it sat on my shelf because I was terrified. I didn't know where I would stand in this book. And finally, I decided to read it, and then I took the brave step of deciding that I would write about it. And again, I didn't, as you say, you know, as a scholar, as I didn't feel as though it was really my place, particularly as a scholar from the United States, knowing that the United States had been complicit, and more than complicit, in the dictatorship, in teaching people how to torture. I mean, what was my responsibility here? But I did it, and I gave this paper, and then you raised your hand, and I thought, oh my God, I had no idea you would be at that conference, that I would never see you. And you're so loving. And the place where it connects is that you made me feel validated. You made me feel as though I could, that my wanting to work in solidarity with you meant something.
Well, Amy, yeah, and you were about, I think, the first person. That's why when the moment to have this forum, we were invited, and thank you for inviting us to this event. I thought, oh, Amy has to be there with me talking about it. The other thing that I wanted to say, I mean, very important with this book, is that it was used as evidence in the trials against the perpetrators, and there's more slides about that. This is the place where the little school was, and keep showing, please. Keep moving. And this is my first visit. The place was destroyed, demolished. Here, we can wait for a minute. The place was demolished to avoid evidence when the Organization of American States went there as a monitoring mission shortly under the Carter administration. And here I am with students visiting the foundations. And in the next slide, you can see, Alejandra Poupio. She is a professor from the school I used to attend, and she with her students, she's an archaeologist, but they excavated and they found a lot of evidence that was used in this trial, because the military kept saying that this place did not exist. They kept saying that we were talking about some other building that was somewhere else that did not respond to this drawing that I had made of the place. So can you keep going? I think this again is what is left. Keep going, please, keep going. This is a trial. And you can see the photo. João Pina, an amazing photographer from Brazil, allowed me to use this. And these are the perpetrators hiding. In the next one, you'll see, in the next slide, you will see the trial. Okay, it's in the auditorium of my own university. And I went to testify there, and they put a little, the perpetrators have sat in the second row. And then the relatives of the disappeared are in the rest of the auditorium. There is all relatives and their students. And when I went to testify, they put on a stage a seat, and I was facing the jury there. But the book was used. I mean, it was useful to write, and then 400 more voices joined mine in denunciation. 400 witnesses testified in these trials that, they were allegedly genocide perpetrators, and they were proven to be genocide perpetrator, and they were sent to jail. In this search for the children of the disappeared, we had a lot of solidarity. We had also the solidarity of a very dear friend, Rita Arditi. Rita Arditi is from the Boston area, and Rita, we're going to show some later on a program, and she published this book. She was the one who put the grandmothers of the Plaza de Mayo in touch with the scientists who helped them prove through DNA what is called the índice de abuelidad, the motherly index. Well, I have so much to talk and so much to share. I want to share a poem, because this connection with mothers who have lost their children, mothers of the disappeared in Ciudad Juarez. I'm going to read this poem by Evangelina Arce. I'm going to read the translation that my students did of Imprisoned, and then you're going to see her. Imprisoned. I'm imprisoned behind these bars, inside my house, as if I were inside a jail. And if the government doesn't like that I search for my daughter, then return her to me with a fair compensation. Threats and harassment shall not stop me. A prisoner, they want me in jail. I'm not afraid. I will continue forward. Those people who threaten me won't dare show their faces. Cowards they should not be. And when we meet, death will choose. I tell those people to stop harassing us, to not waste their time, to live for another place. The damage they did to us, not even money can help us heal. My daughter alive, they should return to me. One thing I tell them, leave me in peace. With persecution and threats, you will gain nothing. You should surely repent.
Bueno, esta de tanto ataque que he tenido con el gobierno, hice esta, le iba a hacer poesía, pero la hice canción.
I was attacked so much by the government, and I wrote this thing. It meant to be a poem, but I decided to make it a song.
Dice así, presa. Presa me encuentro tras de estas rejas, dentro de mi casa, como si fuera una prisión. Y si al gobierno no le parece que ande buscando a mi hija, que me la devuelva y una buena indemnización. Con amenazas y hostigamiento no me detienen, presa me quieren ver en prisión. Miedo no tengo, adelante seguiré. Esas personas que me amenazan, la cara debían de dar. Cobardes que no fueran, y al enfrentarnos la muerte escogerá. Les digo a esas personas que dejen de molestar, que no pierdan su tiempo, que se vayan a otro lugar. El daño que nos hicieron, ni con dinero nos vamos a recuperar. A mi hija viva me la debían de dar. Una cosa les digo, que me dejen en paz, con amenazas y seguimientos. Nada van a ganar, arrepentidos debían de estar.
When I'd read the poem, but hearing it as a corrido was just,
It's amazing, right?
just incredible. It's the way art moves us and makes a real difference. To go back to the little school for a moment, the fact that you put that diagram there so that it could be used as testimony, that in a trial to bring people to justice, that you put those words out there to create international solidarity so that others could pick it up and disseminate it, to make it, put it out there in the world. And then to hear Evangelina Arce sing this incredibly moving song about her loss and the next steps, the things that we need to do now. I'm just really moved by the way that you act in solidarity with others around issues that are international, that are global, that your heart and your dedication is that big.
Thank you. That's what keeps me alive, I think. That's what gives meaning to the story that I need to tell, and to the fact that I survived. I don't believe in survivor's guilt. And sometimes people say, well, are you guilty because you survived? And no, it's It's another feeling. It's a different feeling. It's not simple. But the fact that all these women, the mothers, are fighting there. Evangelina is a woman who went only to second grade, and she started to write poems after they tried to kill her for looking for justice for her daughter, Sylvia. I don't think Sylvia Arce is here, right? Yeah, and Evangelina is here, and you saw her. I'm so moved by all these events that I'm sorry if I'm a little scattered here, but my students translator, I worked with my students translating these poems and transcribing these poems. Evangelina allowed me to Xerox her notebook, and then we disseminated all this poetry. If people want to purchase this book, I send the money to her, and they can go to my website, my website, and they can email me and I'll send it to them. So I think we might have to, I mean, we are a little hurried by the time. I think I wanted to share too much stuff, Amy. And I wanted to talk to you because we haven't seen each other in centuries.
True. It's so true. You know, you've been telling me about your daughter Ruth's poetry for a long time, and you said that she's a better poet than you. And I thought, oh yeah, well, that's what mothers say. So I'm not going to necessarily agree with you, but I think that she is spectacular. Reading her work, after you sent me some of it, I went and looked for some more, and she's just wonderful. So I want you to take the time to read a piece of hers, if you would.
Yeah, I'm gonna read a poem from The Strange House Testifies, one of her poetry collections. And the poem is part of a longer one called Oh Infamous Window that is in conversation with the Nunca Más, the Never Again. And it's about visiting me in jail. There were no water fountains or Coke machines in the courtyard waiting area, and most prisoners were called Los Comunes because they were common thieves and murderers. Bottom line, sister, the relatives were allowed chairs and shade. And courtyard waiting area is a bit generous to describe where we waited. We were not there for Los Comunes. We stood against the endless prison wall on the outside for all the better eyes to watch. Our good clothes turned rank, our clean faces salt. We hated the eye back. Ask God for water. A guard spat at a daughter of Los Subversivos, and there's nothing infantile or Hollywood about why the longest finger of the Crusades. And so when the hour came, we marched family per family into the church that sanctified the prison, and then out and straight into the box where all the demons were kept. And when we were in, and they closed the door. That's Ruth Irupe Sanabria, and you are watching paintings by my mother. I'm gonna read a poem by her from the collection that she published at 80 years old, her first book of poetry. And I'm gonna read it in English and in Spanish. And it's about visiting me in prison. Behind the high facade. At 1 p.m., thieves to the right, subversives to the left. We subversives comfortably line up on the sidewalk along the high cement facade, washed by the falling rain. The guard at the prison's gate, after such a friendly welcome, gesticulates to emphasize the necessity of putting order in that exemplary place, while letting the line on the right side in, which seems to have come in time. At 3 p.m., We gently are invited to enter the building and are sent to the inspection rooms. Woman warden with delicate fingers touches us everywhere to check if we brought dangerous items. That's a very important thing to do. My 3-year-old granddaughter could have forgotten to leave at home the razor blades and little knives she usually plays with and bring them beneath her underwear or maybe hidden in her body. At 4 p.m. Sure, the line on the right side is in time. They are sent directly to visit the prisoners. Our line is sent to the prison's chapel to wait and enjoy the place for hours. When we tell the guard who passes by we are thirsty, he with a big smile and very friendly answers, "Go and ask God for water." At 6 p.m., 2 guards come and ask us to follow them while walking through open gates. We smell the fresh meat aroma a cook is carrying in a cart to prepare the prisoners' dinner. I look around to see if a bathroom is available. When I ask the guard about that, they say, "We just arrived at the visiting room." They let us go in first and shut the door from outside with a padlock. That's my mother, Raquel Partnoy. And we very often, do I have time to read her in Spanish? Probably. I don't know who my boss is at this point to do this, but she says yes. Bienvenida. A las 13 horas, ladrones a la derecha, subversivos a la izquierda. Nosotros, subversivos, nos ubicamos confortablemente a lo largo de la alta fachada, bañada por la persistente lluvia. En la puerta de la cárcel, el guardia, después de tan amigable bienvenida, gesticula y enfatiza la necesidad de poner orden en tan ejemplar lugar, mientras deja entrar la fila de la derecha que nos dice fue la primera en llegar. A las 15 horas, gentilmente nos invitan a entrar en el edificio y envían al lugar de inspección. Guardianas con manos delicadas nos revisan y tocan por todos lados para ver si traemos objetos peligrosos. Esto es necesario de hacer. Mi nieta de 3 años pudo haber olvidado dejar en casa las hojas de afeitar y cuchillos pequeños con los que suele jugar y traerlos escondidos entre sus ropas o en su cuerpo. A las 16 horas, como seguro corresponde, la fila de la derecha pasa a visitar sus familiares detenidos. Primero, mientras la nuestra es mandada a la izquierda de a la iglesia de la cárcel para esperar y disfrutar por horas el lugar. Cuando le decimos a un guardia que tenemos sed, este con amplia sonrisa y cortés contesta, vayan a pedirle agua a Dios. A las 18 horas vienen 2 guardias y piden que los sigamos. Mientras cruzamos portones nos llega el aroma de carne fresca que un cocinero lleva en su carro para preparar la cena de los prisioneros. Miro a mi alrededor para ver si encuentro un baño y al preguntar sobre el tema los guardias me responden, justo llegamos a la sala de visitas. Nos hacen entrar primero y cierran la puerta desde afuera con doble candado. Raquel Partnoy.
You know, I learned 2 things about you, Mother. I'd seen her illustrations in your work, but I hadn't seen her work in color before. And it's just,
See?
explodes.
I have the original of that here and it's always with me.
And the fact that she writes too. I mean, this leads us to this question of intergenerational testimony. Your mother, yourself, your daughter, the trauma that gets pulled forward and backward through generations, and the struggle and the will to survive and to talk back, to refuse victimhood, to not let those worms win. It's just so moving, so powerful.
Thank you. Yeah, we do a lot of these 3 generations things for the past, I guess, my mom moved to the States 26 years ago. And since then, we've been doing a lot of these events with Ruth and with her. She is now, she's 88, she's not able, and plus the pandemic has taken a toll. She's not able to participate, but she's very excited that I'm doing this, and eventually she'll see the video and she'll enjoy. She keeps saying, we have to do something, we have to, and she's writing every day. She started to write because she has macular degeneration, so she was losing her eyesight. So she said, well, if Borges, if they're blind writers, and so she started to write poetry back then when she started when she was diagnosed, and she went almost blind, but she still writes. She doesn't paint these days, but yeah, she's a big example. I mean, it's just a,
That's really, my mother had macular degeneration also, and she lived to be 100 and was over 100, and was active and vibrant. I mean, till about a week or two before she died. So may your mother have that same joy of life, despite the macular degeneration, which also affected my mother. I had no idea we had that connection. I'm just wondering if we should move on to questions now. We have a question from a student at the university at Suffolk. But before we move to that, please, anybody who would like to join can, if you're shy, you can put your question in the chat, but what we'd really like is for you to raise your hand and to join us on screen. While you're thinking about your questions, I'd like to move to Nicole, who's, as I said, a student at Suffolk, and she, whose pronouns are she, her, hers, and ask you what you want to ask.
Hi. So my question to you is, what was your experience while writing these beautiful pieces, and powerful as well? And did the act of writing kind of help you as a way of processing your experiences as well?
It's not so simple. It's not so simple. Oh, the act of writing helped me not feel so powerless, because I mean, it depends. If I write poetry, which I haven't shared now, it's something that I've done as a child, and when I'm very sad, when I feel bad, I write poetry, and it helps me that moment. For the experience in the concentration camp, the writing testimony was a way of giving, letting people know that these things happened, and a way of showing that I was not silenced. They wanted to disappear me, right? And so it's an act of resistance. It's, in a way, it helps you process, but at times it traumatizes you because you are remembering stuff to write it. So it's not like healing. I always say that healing is highly overrated. That I'm not sure we heal. We live with the pain, and we do stuff with that pain. Yeah, I don't know if I'm answering.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm glad you joined us and asked that really, really important question and allowed Alicia to give that very complicated, not so easy answer. Please, if you'd like to join with questions, we're ready to hear from you. But here's one that's come in. La Escuelita, the little school, has been so successful. How has life been after writing it? What's some of the feedback you received? How did it change your life?
I wanted to share with you a slide of the event that I'm doing in a couple of weeks. I don't think it was shown in the slideshow. There is an event in which I'm putting together, it's the translators and the editors of the different editions of the little school. So it recently was published in, if you see to the bottom of this leaflet here, is the Hebrew translation was published in Israel a month ago. And my translator, Iran Zelgov, he and his wife, Jali Dekel, were, my translator was riding the metro in New York, and he saw one of my poems in the metro at this program by poets and writers that writing poetry in the metro, and he connected with me, and then he published this. You can see also the copy in the white cover is the French translation, and you're gonna the French translation has the layout of the little school there, and again, it was a small. They're all small publishers, small publishing houses, people who just put solidarity in there, and the translation that you see to the other side of the leaflet is the cover of the Bengali, published in India, the Bangla, and then the British. And so the interesting thing, that was a wonderful question. Sometimes I feel like, I mean, in a way, all the relatives of the disappeared from my hometown and people who need to know more, they come, and there is no day that I don't address some questions, about this. And I'm in the tunnel of time. For 1 year after justice was done and the perpetrators were sent to jail, I had a year of silence from public speaking. And I didn't even read in public. I had a student of mine read my poetry, and that was showing that there are other voices now speaking, and I could take a little break. But now I'm back into this. And when they published it in England, my daughter Ruth was little. She was 12, I think. And we were very poor. We were like putting together pennies to buy stuff. And, you know, we came as refugees to the States. And so it was not easy. It was much easier than how it is for people now who are coming as refugees. But they, in that moment, that it was published in England, my daughter said, "Well, if it's in the bestsellers list, where is the money?" And the money was very little. There was always alternative presses. There is no a lot of money. So my life was changed in the sense that students read it, and you know, it's I don't know. You come to the next event, but I wanted to talk a little bit about because if you notice, I don't know if you notice, I'm wearing the Immigrant Defenders sweatshirt today because one of my daughters works with Immigrant Defenders, and she interviews the children who arrive to the States by themselves, undocumented, and are in shelters, and she interviews them to get them legal help with immigrant defenders, and hopefully reunite them with their families here in the States, or let them, make sure they don't end up in the prison when they turn 18. That moment they end up in prisons like Adelanto. And so what always, when I'm talking about my experience as a refugee coming to the States, I always want to remind you that at this moment the situation is much, much worse, and it keeps us, very, very, very worried.
You've brought us into the present, but we have two questions that bring us back to your experience writing the little school. So since people have asked them, I would like to ask you. One is from Linda, and she asks, does writing someone else's story bring back trauma for you? Or is it therapeutic, perhaps? I think you addressed that a little bit.
A little bit. Again, one of my projects, I'm retiring in 2 months, and one of my projects is a book that I started 20 years ago, and it's a book about Alaide Fopa. Alaide Fopa, a poet, the founder of FemPress, the first feminist publication of the Americas, the founder also of Foro de la Mujer, the first feminist radio station in Mexico, radio program in Mexico. And so I wanted to write about the last days of her life, because she was killed in a torture session in Guatemala when she returned. And she had 3 of her children killed. And so I was doing research with the help of Elena Poniatowska. She helped me a lot. She let me use her phone to call people. And so everybody was responding. And then now each time I meet her, she says, "Where's your book?" And the thing is, I freaked out because I was interviewing the children, and I was thinking, what am I doing with this life? Each child had a different idea of what the mother was about, and I felt, how can I write about her life without being without being a scavenger bird, without exploiting it, without hurting anybody. So it is hard. It's very hard to write about other people's lives for me.
And what about, this is a question from Olivia that kind of follows on this, taking it in a slightly different direction. Olivia asks, how do you feel sharing your experiences with your own mother and your daughter? And how has that influenced your writing?
Shared with them, some of those experiences are very hard to share with them. When we came to the States, I came with Ruth was 4 years old, and we came to Seattle, and I had a lot of interviews with the media, because we were, at that time, the people were still disappeared and people were still in prison. And so I never, and then a few years later, and I went with Ruth to Buenos Aires, and we were in the Plaza de Mayo marching with the mothers of the disappeared. And one of the mothers is asking me about the concentration camp where I was, because they all knew my story by heart, and they wanted to know more, to see if I had seen their own children there. And so So she's asking me, and I'm telling about the place, La Escuelita, the little school. And my daughter, who's walking by my hand, says, "You never talked to me about this." And I'm like, I'm in shock. And this mother, that was Matilde Melibowski, one of the mothers. There is a book by her, Circle of Love Over Death, was about the stories of the mothers of Plaza de Mayo. And Matilde said, oh, she's probably denying what the trauma, right? She's trying, probably. And then I realized I never told her. I had never told her what had happened. I have told other people while she was around, and she was, of course, blocking whatever I was telling, because it's, you know, growing with this trauma. So with my other daughters, I made a point of telling until they wanted to hear. And with my mom, there are things, I mean, I will not tell, and sometimes I will, because sometimes she thinks things are worse than what they were. And so I tell her, but you see, she can paint and express what I could feel too.
I'd like to thank all of you for being here, for sharing this evening with us. I'd like to thank the people at Suffolk University and GBH for allowing me to spend time with Alicia, because this has been such a gift. Thank you. Thank you, Susan.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. Thank you, Amy. Thank you. This has been a treat. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely wonderful. We really appreciate you spending time. I can't thank you enough, Amy and Alicia. You are both such treasures. My heart is full. I'm speechless, really. So thank you both so very, very much for your generosity, for all that you have done in your careers. It is just truly remarkable. You are just warrior women, and I just so admire you and lift you up and honor you and pay homage to you. So thank you both so much.